Alright, what's good, man? The boy Darien, I'm back, and today we back watching JxmyHighroller. We done with the 90s, man. I got a question for y'all. Was the 90s really that bad? Like, I've been seeing clips of like Michael Jordan, and they saying he can't dribble with his left instead. They calling him Jalen Brown. They said Michael Jordan is Jalen Brown with hoop earrings. So, was the 90s really that bad? Let's see, man.
My brothers, we are in the midst of a civil war. The age-old debate of past versus present has reached critical mass, and sides have been taken. A revolution is taking place, and we're losing good men. Old school versus new school. Back in the day versus modern day. A story as old as time itself. I tried to ignore this bloodbath, but just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, it all got so much worse.
We done with the 90s.
Film of NBA games from the 80s and 90s coming to light, showing that...
Bro, what is this? What is this defense? He look like he doing karate.
Film of NBA games from the 80s and 90s coming to light, showing that the good old days were in fact not that good. This whole time, the punishing defensive legend was actually just a bunch of plumbers camping out in the paint looking for someone to hack. Shots clanking off the backboard, players running around aimlessly, wreaking havoc. And worst of all, Michael Jeffrey Jordan, the supposed greatest basketball player of all time, didn't even have a left hand. What is going on? Have we been lied to about basketball?
Bro, Michael Jordan not having a left hand is like... That's some of the most craziest stuff I didn't heard, bro. Like if you seen Michael Jordan highlights, bro, like he be jellying in like both hands. Like he might not drive left every time, but like he can finish with it. Like I don't know, that's just dumb.
80s and 90s.
And then I seen the clips too. I was like, they really nitpicking it hard.
Deceived by lowlights, misinformation, and cherry-picked clips. Well, I think I've got an answer, and some of y'all ain't gonna like it. Today's video is sponsored by SeatGeek.
Hey, shout out to SeatGeek, but you know, we not trying to see that. I ain't gonna lie.
We done with the 90s. 5 simple words that have completely divided fans of the NBA. I've seen well thought out video essays, hard-hitting analysis, testimonies from past and present players talking about their experience in the league and how it's changed over the years. And none of those things managed to do what these 5 simple words have done in just a week. Soon enough, the clips came rolling in of players from that era dribbling off their feet, throwing up air balls, and putting together moves that you might see at your local high school's JV game. So, for whatever it's worth, here is my long-winded take on this whole discussion.
We found the tapes. Okay.
I want to begin by saying what this discourse has taught me more than anything else is that NBA fans today never actually took the time to go back and watch games of the past.
Bro, that's literally what I was thinking. Like, these kids that's talking have never like actually went back and watched the game. Like back then, like the spacing now makes the game so much more different. Like literally back then, it was like at least 3 people in the paint at once, so it was way harder to score. I'm gonna just let them go, bro.
Brothers, I have been harping on this for years, begging for fans of the game, whether you are new or have been watching for years, to just go back and watch full games. Not highlights, not clips, full-length games of eras from the past. And after seeing this discussion devolve into where it is today, it is clear to me that most people never take the time. I'm seeing countless fans have this sort of awakening as they're watching films of these old games as if the footage was buried or lost and it's finally being unearthed for the world to see. It's been right here on YouTube for the past 15 years. You mean to tell me the same fans who chime in with a full-blown thesis on the GOAT debate never spared the time to even watch the games they were referring to? I guess that does explain a lot. Now, I'd like to think I'm somewhere in the middle on this whole discussion. I have said on multiple occasions that players in today's NBA are simply more skilled than players of the past, which has resulted in bigger stat.
I mean, that's obvious though. It's like evolution is gonna make everybody more skilled. Like they're not gonna keep doing the moves that was new in the 90s. Like all the moves that was new in the 90s, they just made those moves better. Like, I mean, it's obvious.
Lines and higher point totals than ever before. It's not the defense that has gotten worse, it's the offense that has gotten better. You know, that whole spiel. But I also have an appreciation for the greats that came before and how incredible some players of past eras were. In fact, I almost feel like I'm hallucinating seeing this 90s basketball slander campaign unfold in front of my eyes. It feels like everyone's perception on the age-old debate changed literally overnight. I know that's not the case, but after seeing all of this play out, it sure feels that way. But today, I'm not just gonna show you some cherry-picked clips.
Yeah, that nigga got big by he got big by Muggsy Bogues. That nigga, he spun his shit. I ain't gonna lie.
But today,
I ain't never seen Muggsy Bogues do that.
Hey! Clips or unhinge this narrative even further. I'm gonna show you real film, real data, and proof of how we might actually be done with the 80s and 90s. And, of course, if Michael Jordan really had no left hand. Spoiler, he did. Now, I have been an advocate for the modern players are better than players of the past movement for quite some time now. In fact, as crazy as it is for younger fans to say Michael Jordan was trash, it's just as absurd for older fans to say the game hasn't evolved and gotten better over the last 30 years. Because that
this hit machine guard top was incredible. Pick and roll. R-O-L-E, roll. Imagine.
That's all this debate really is. Young fans versus old fans, or fans that watched this versus fans that are watching this. But objectively, players today are much better than they were in the 80s and even the 90s. Specifically, the lower end of the talent pool in the NBA today is vastly better than it was in the past. I think great players would be great in any era, but with the spacing, the shot making, the emphasis on offense as opposed to defense has made the depth across the NBA today just way ahead of where it was in the 80s and the 90s. There was, without exaggeration, guys in the NBA throughout the 80s and 90s that were on NBA rosters.
Yeah, bro. They literally had like 7-foot niggas out there just to hack. That is one thing though that they used to do. Used to be some big ass 7-foot nigga, fucking 250 pounds, and he was only there just to scare you in the paint, bro. They don't got those no more. Like this nigga that's like a big ass center that only play defense. Maybe like Rudy Gobert. Who else? There's not that many of them, bro. I ain't gonna lie.
Just to accumulate fouls and sit in the paint and be big. Some of these players were offensively inept, and that was okay because their role was not to create offense. But in today's NBA, where offense reigns supreme, there is no room for these players.
That free throw was terrible.
And should go back and watch film of games, not highlights, from this era and see just how limited the skill sets of some of these players were. The shot making, for the most part, was limited to set jumpers, slashers coming downhill for layups, and big men trying to muscle their way to a bucket down low in the midst of what appears to be a wrestling match. Catch a player off guard with a double team, and they immediately pick up their dribble. Simple things like guards turning their back to the basket 20 feet out instead of creating.
Luka play like this right now, though. Does he not? This is how Luka be bringing the ball up, bro.
Space off the dribble. Even players looking down at the ball while trying to get out.
Is that Doc Rivers? Don't tell me that's Doc Rivers.
Even players looking down at the ball while trying to get out on a fast break was very common in this era. And these aren't lowlights or cherry-picked incidences. This is just what the game looked like 35 years ago. But even without film, nearly every metric suggests modern players are more capable of players in the past. Free throw percentage was worse, three-point percentage was worse, turnover percentage was higher. They used to shoot more free throws, but still ended up with far less points. Now, this is not to say that this era of hoops was trash. That's just disingenuous and flat out wrong. These were the best players in the world at the time. It was just simply not as good as what it is today. But maybe there's another layer to this that needs to be factored in to really understand why these players were not as skilled as the players of today.
Alright, so why? It's because they had film.
Now, despite this being a very relevant topic for years, the idea of rule changes and how these changes have affected the game still remain a mystery to some. Players were a product of their era and the rules of their era. The first step to discovering greats of the past is to watch film of them play.
So they really was, they just wasn't gonna shoot it. It didn't. Nobody in the back was gonna help. They was just walking.
The first step to discovering greats of the past is to watch film of them play. The next step is to gather and understand the context of the film you are watching. When you see a 6'9" Magic Johnson go flying down the court with what looks like kind of a stiff dribble, you may think the man has no bag. But my friends, Magic Johnson did have a bag, but the rules in place at the time only allowed him to reach so far into it before he got called for every violation in the rulebook. Consider the fact that any move—
That is facts. Like, imagine you drop Kyrie Irving in the 80s, right? You drop Kyrie Irving into the 80s, they're probably gonna call Kerry off his second or third dribble, bro. So, after his second or third dribble, they're probably gonna say Kerry or travel or some shit, bro. Like, all that shit he be doing now, like them little hezzies and all that, like, because niggas now do be carrying the ball. Like, I've seen niggas do this, and like nothing happens, bro. Like, the carry, it'd be crazy nowadays. But imagine you drop Kyrie in the 80s or the 90s.
Move where your hand wasn't completely on top of the basketball was considered a carry. No zero steps, no gather steps. You get 2 steps, and anything more was called a travel. No backward shuffles to create separation. No lunging into players to draw easy fouls. Here's a clip of Danny Ainge hitting Kevin McHale with a hezzy in the mid-80s. And the man thinks he just witnessed witchcraft.
But when practice sessions were completed,
I've seen this clip before. This nigga said travel. I think I'm pretty sure he said travel or something.
The most competitive competition began.
Double dribble, that's what he said. Nah, this move was elite though.
Sessions were completed.
My boy Danny Ainge is cooking.
Some of the most competitive competition began.
Here's some more clips of players getting called for travels and carries doing moves that are very typical and allowed in 2024. 90% of the moves you see today, the very method most players generate their offense, would be called for some sort of violation 40 or 30 or even 20 years ago. And this isn't just some cop-out or excuse as to why these players of the past weren't doing this stuff. The rule changes are real, documented pieces of NBA history. You can literally look them up. The game got looser, players grew up and shaped their game around these looser rules, and now they have free reign to let their basketball bag run wild. But that's kind of the point. Players of the past didn't grow up practicing 25-footers. They didn't work on a dozen moves to create separation. They played in offensive systems that focused on the team, the collective, schemes and sets that resembled something closer to college basketball.
That's another point too, yeah. The game right now is less fundamental and more about your skills, which is that's true, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't have worked on skills though. Like just because you got your role don't mean that you shouldn't be working on other things though. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Where ISO possessions were few and far in between, so they never developed an arsenal to counter these situations.
That is true though. No one really ISO'd. No one really like ISO'd, besides maybe like Jordan. But even he probably didn't ISO that much, for real.
The rules of the time limited their game, which resulted in them having a more limited skill set than players today. If Larry Bird grew up with a three-point line, he might have been the greatest long-range shooter ever, but he didn't. And as a result, he didn't shoot a lot of threes and he wasn't as efficient as the best shooters today. We can sit here and assume these players of the past might be as capable as players today if they were playing under the same rules and conditions, but they didn't. And I don't think we should assume that. The fact is they played in a different time and they became a product of that time. But that's not to say the game was trash back then, or that the superstars of these eras couldn't compete in today's league. Now, as time goes by, I think it's easy to forget just how long ago 1980 was. 44 years ago, if my math is correct, which is in fact a very long time ago. In 1985, Magic Johnson won an NBA title, Larry Bird won the league MVP, and Michael Jordan won Rookie of the Year. That was 39 years ago from today,
Sheesh.
which is the same exact amount of time that has passed from that 1985 season to the year the NBA was founded in 1946. Look at these clips. Do you think these players could compete with the likes
Who is this? George Mikan? What the fuck? This nigga got George Mikan clips. Like, how he even find this?
of Bird, Magic, and Jordan? Let me answer that for you. No. But take the best players of the 80s and 90s, and could they compete in today's league? Absolutely. Give these guys some credit. Watching this today is the equivalent of watching this in the 80s. And yet this product is vastly closer to the basketball we see today than this product was to what fans were witnessing in the 80s. In fact, we can use different superstars as sort of a cross-generational measuring stick to see just how stiff the competition has been over the years. Larry and Magic played Michael, who played Kobe, who played LeBron, who has played the players of today. And nowhere down this timeline was there any real jump or fall off in production or level of competition from one era to the next. Each era
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I would say this era is definitely more competitive, bro. I would say this era is definitely more competitive. Who was Jordan playing against? Who was Jordan's rival? Clyde Drexler? Who's LeBron's rival? Kevin Durant, Giannis, Luka, Giannis. Like, who's Kobe's rival? Like, I get what he's trying to say, but like, I feel like the comp is gotten better and better and better, low key, in my opinion. Just because everybody else is more skilled.
Era had their stars. Those stars crossed paths with stars of other eras, and no one era was clear-cut ahead of the other. If the 80s were so bad, then why did players of the 90s have to wait for those guys to get old and retire to have a shot at winning? And if the 90s were so bad, then why did players of the 2000s not win until those guys retired? We don't need to assume that adjacent eras could compete with one another because we actually saw it. MJ struggled with some of the guys that came before him, Shaq struggled against Hakeem, and Kobe struggled against MJ, LeBron struggled against guys like Duncan and Dirk, and players of today have struggled to get past some of the older players in the league who are a product of the previous era. Now, what we shouldn't do is jump 3 or 4 eras at a time, ignoring entire decades of evolution and saying the game back then was better or even as good as it is today. At a certain point, the knowledge and wisdom that comes from actually witnessing decades of NBA history, like some older fans have, becomes skewed and watered down by nostalgia and a generational bias. Superstars are superstars because their game transcends the era they played in, but they also played in an inferior league. These two ideas are not mutually exclusive, and although generational talents of the past would do just fine today, this same logic does not apply to the vast majority of the league throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, bro, like, I get what he's trying to say is like, the next era always gotta wait their turn, which is true, but like, I don't know, man. I don't agree with the competition being the same level as it is. Like this, the competition, like, I don't know, bro.
So if the 80s were inferior to today's league and the 90s were inferior as well, when did the NBA become not trash? Well, it depends on how you look at it. Ironically, I think there's a pretty clear distinction to the skill set of players before Michael Jordan hit his peak and after. For example, the early 90s and late 90s, although being in the same decade, were massively different in play style and skill set. Think for a second about the fact that Magic Johnson was still in his prime in the early 90s, and Allen Iverson was entering his prime in the late 90s. In less than
Bro, young AI looks so weird with like no tattoos and like no headband, no arts, like he just looks so bare.
10 years, basketball became a massively different game. By the late 90s, the players who grew up watching Jordan fly through the air and slice up defenses were in the league and were reshaping the role that perimeter players played. Guys like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Stephon Marbury, Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter. All these guys came into the league around the same time and were products of what they saw MJ do throughout his career. Players with a skill set that more closely resembles what we see today than it did to the skill sets of players of the 80s and even early 90s. This is where I think most fans might make the distinction of when the league really took a leap, not in competitiveness,
the 2000s,
but rather play style.
Yeah, the 2000s is like when it started getting to like how it is now. But even in the 2000s, the spacing was nowhere near what it is now. Though, like the fact that everybody on the court can shoot a three now, that's what really just fucked up the game. Like the Warriors is what really changed the game up. Like that was another big point in NBA history where that changed up a lot, like how everybody plays, bro. Because like they see that the 3-pointer is the most valuable shot. So not everybody, like, if you can't shoot a three, you can't get on the court, bro. Basically, like, that's how it feels.
You can go back and watch these guys play, and it's not too different than watching an NBA game today. Or you can point to the shift in play style that happened in the late 2010s, after Steph Curry redefined what makes a great championship caliber player, and the league adjusted to this new 3-point heavy perimeter focused style of basketball. Similar to Jordan, the kids who watched what Steph was doing in the mid 2010s emulated that style of play, tailored their games to it, and are now in the league doing things that only Steph could do a decade ago. So if we're done with the 80s and 90s, where can we look back and no longer apply this era tax on these players? I think most fans would agree that the turn of the century is where the modern era of hyper-skilled players began. You can say objectively that this era was not trash, and most players of this generation would do just fine in today's league. But if that is the case, then modern NBA fans are holding a ticking time bomb, and they might not even know it.
What you mean, boy? Hey, this nigga Jimmy is good as fuck at like making his videos into like a storytelling and like cliffhanger. He got cliffhangers, he got storytelling, he got climax. Like he got all the parts of a story into a YouTube. Like he fire, bro. Shout out to Jimmy, bro.
When we are older and a new generation of NBA fans claim our favorite players, the guys we grew up watching, are not as good as the players of the future, what will you have to say? Right now, there is no one in the world who can shoot like Steph Curry. But inevitably...
Right, imagine in 20 years, bro. There's going to be like 4 Currys in the league. There's going to be like 4 point guards that walk in to shoot from anywhere, bro. Like, just imagine, dude. That actually makes me excited, though, like, for how the league's gonna look in 20 years. Like, imagine like 2 more Wembeyamas, like two 7'4" dudes that can dribble, shoot, do everything. Like, we already got Bol, but Bol wasn't like a finished, cleaned up product. But now that you got Wemby, there's gonna be some other tall ass kid out there, or somebody gonna see their kid is 7'5", they gonna be like, oh yeah, you got to get on that court for real. But just imagine though, like,
there will be. And eventually,
actually makes me happy.
Many players who can shoot like him. His records will fall, his percentages won't look as good through the lens of 2040, and although his legacy will be cemented, his actual game will be put into question. And based on the arguments I'm hearing today on why past players were trash, we will have nothing to say that will change their minds. We know that Curry was the first to do what he's doing. He is a pioneer of the modern NBA. We have context to back up our claims. But if we aren't willing to hear older fans out today, what makes us think younger fans will hear us out in the future? Mark my words. There will be a day when young fans will go back, watch film of LeBron, and say he couldn't compete with players of the future. In fact,
imagine saying this. The thing is though, like, he's saying this now, but like no one ever... Alright, so Jordan, for example, no one says Jordan is trash. Like, no one ever says, if you say that, you just like, you shouldn't be in a basketball conversation, right? No one ever says that, but like, and like the Michael Jordan would be Jaylen Brown today. Like, I feel like that's a troll. Like, no one's actually serious when they say that, right? At least I hope so. But like, imagine going back and looking at LeBron and saying he's trash. The dude that leads in points, he's top 10 rebounds, he's top 5 assists, he's like number 4 in assists. Like, if you ever say that, bro, like, I don't know, like, You need to stop watching
It's
basketball.
already happening. Fans saying he has no bag. Younger players putting up bigger numbers than he ever did. Skill sets a bit deeper with games that look more polished. It's all fun and games now to crack jokes about past eras. But our day will come too, and it ain't gonna be pretty. But
Luka be shooting
Giannis
bullshit,
could only
bro.
run and dunk. Your era was trash. Y'all had a dude who couldn't get 2 feet off the ground running the whole league. You can scramble to pull up clips and show the numbers, but their minds will already be made up. This is why I think it is so important to have genuine, thought-out discourse about the game if you're truly a fan of it. But to all of the older fans out there, you kinda started this whole thing. For years.
Nah, they did, bro. The 90s are so much better. Y'all are soft nowadays.
We heard y'all badmouth
Soft,
modern
you guys
players,
flop,
saying the
blah,
league
blah.
is soft. Players today couldn't compete back then. Back in my day, real men played the game. Y'all cannot be mad that some fans are done with the 80s and 90s when y'all never even gave modern basketball a chance. Sure, a lot of fans never took the time to go back and watch the greats of the past, but let's be honest for a second. Older fans don't watch games today. They catch a stray clip on Facebook of LeBron flopping, and like an echo chamber of disgruntled old men, they just start firing away in the comments, agreeing with one another.
Bro, this is every Facebook conversation, bro. If you don't be on Facebook, bro, this really is how I be looking, bro.
Y'all asked for this. I've been watching the
It's a
NBA
year
since the
21 and
mid-2000s.
still flopping.
Kobe, D-Wade, McGrady, Iverson, Shaq, Nash, those were my guys. But I can acknowledge those greats and say they were incredible while also acknowledging that that version of the NBA as a whole was not as refined or as good as it is today. Now, will I be able to make that distinction in 20 years when some snot-nosed brat tells me my glorious king was trash? I'm not so sure.
Saying LeBron is trash is crazy though. Like, that make me want to smack you in your face, bro. What you mean?
Now, it's time to once and for all take a real close look at this accusation that Michael Jordan did not have a left hand. I felt like I was having a bad dream when I first saw this claim, but unfortunately, I was not. I feel like no one actually believes this. This is just some high-level trolling. But in an effort to stop this nonsense from spreading any further, I have no choice but to take these accusations seriously. So I selected 8 random games ranging from Michael Jordan's rookie season all the way up to the mid-90s, and play by play gathered all of his possessions throughout these games, charted when he went to his right, when he went to his left, and what those possessions resulted in. And here is what I found. Jordan made a move with his left hand or his right hand 227 times. Of those 227 moves, 121 of them were with his right hand and 106 of them were with.
Yeah, he just exposed. He exposing that white kid that was yeah, there was some kid that made a chart just like this, and there was some like he had like 6 turnovers with his left hand, and like he was like 8 for 20 something. I don't know. It was
his
something
left
weird.
hand. Of the
I think I know what I'm talking
121
about.
right-handed moves, he passed up or got fouled on 54 of them, so I didn't bother charting those. 65 of these moves resulted in a shot, in which he made 63% of them and only turned the ball over 2 times. Now, moves that he made with his left hand resulted in a pass or him getting fouled 45 times, while 55 of these left-handed moves ended up in a
He
shot,
was less
in which
efficient
he
with his
made
left, which is,
51% and
I mean, everybody got their strengths and weaknesses, bro. Like, if he had a choice to go right and he had a opening on the right hand, why would he not go right when that's his strongest way of getting a bucket? I mean, I don't know. No, this argument is kind of like dumb though, in my opinion.
and 6 moves resulted in a turnover. So based on this data, Jordan was definitely more comfortable going right, especially near the rim and even on mid-range jumpers. He struggled a bit in comparison to his right whenever he pulled up off of a left-handed dribble. But overall, Jordan went to his left 47% of the time, and although it was his weaker hand, he was still above league average even while going to his left. But 8 games and 350 minutes of basketball is a relatively small sample size. So I looked into it further and found this. A detailed breakdown of Michael Jordan's shot chart and shot tendencies in 3 seasons from 1990 to 1992. 126 games and over 4,800 minutes in total, tracking exactly what Michael did on the court.
Sheesh,
for
where do you
3
find this
seasons.
at? What the
And
hell?
here's what the data shows. In total, Michael made 1,074 moves in isolation, going either to his right or to his left hand. 48% of those moves were with his right hand, and 52% of those moves were with his left hand. When going to the right, Michael shot 61.7% on 410 shots with 15 turnovers, resulting in 1.38 points per possession. When going to his left, Michael shot 61.3% on 421 shots with 36 turnovers, resulting in 1.31 points per possession. So even with a much larger sample size, Michael not only had a left hand, he went to it just as often as he went to his right and was nearly as proficient with his left as he was with his right. Now, for some context, throughout this 3-year span, Michael made on average 4.4 left-handed isolation moves, or in this case, isolation possessions, that resulted in 1.31 points per possession. Now, here are some prolific scores from this season and their overall tendencies and efficiency in
he exposed it. He might bring up everybody else now. Damn.
isolation.
Everybody else
Keep
gonna
in
be the
mind,
same type
this
shit.
data includes both right-handed and left-handed moves from these players. And now here is Michael Jordan with just his left hand. So, yeah. I'd say contrary to what has now become popular belief, Michael Jordan had a left hand. And I cannot believe we had to dig into the data to come to this conclusion.
We not done with the 80s and 90s.
I think the overall idea that the 80s and 90s were a far less skilled time in the NBA compared to today is probably fair. I mean, you'd be crazy to think the game hasn't evolved in 4 decades. But to say the league was trash back then is just wrong. I think more than anything, it's the style of play and the way basketball games would unfold back then that really throws some fans off when they go to watch film of these old games. It's like looking at a box score from the mid-2000s and thinking everyone sucked because the games finished with final scores in the 80s. But the players weren't bad, it was just a different game back then. It was slower, more methodical, more team and scheme based than it is today. And similarly, I think you could say the 80s and 90s had its fair share of bad basketball. But that doesn't mean all the players were bad, especially the superstars of those eras. That was just the state of the game they were playing in. I think some older fans have a skewed perception of how good the game was back then, but I also think they just genuinely liked that style of ball regardless of the evolution of the league. In 20 years, there could be a dozen players around the league that shoot like Steph Curry, but I doubt we will hold the same appreciation and affinity for those players as we did to the guy who
We definitely won't. That's the thing. We definitely won't. Like once Steph Curry type players become regular, which I think is gonna have not regular, but I feel like within 20 years, there's gonna be at least 3-4 players in the league that can shoot from range, any type of range, and has his type game style. But once you have something and it's gone, you don't like. That's when you actually appreciate it.
Pioneered this style of play and did it during the good old days. In the 90s, no one looked back at how the league was in the 60s claiming it was better. And so realistically, we shouldn't be looking back at the 80s and 90s claiming the league was superior than it is today, or even just as good for that matter. A lot of these ideas that favor modern basketball are becoming more mainstream as fans dive deeper into these topics and add context to narratives that have been floating around for decades. But I think this push to be done with the 80s and 90s is a bit overkill. We want to add context and nuance and knowledge to these discussions, not remove entire decades from it altogether. Sadly, I don't think any of this has or will change anyone's mind. This revolt against old school ball was either confirmation of what you already thought, or this entire discussion is just blasphemy to you. Are we done with the 80s and 90s? Maybe. But for the sake of the game and the greats that paved the way, I sure hope not.
Alright, man, so this is the amazing video, actually. This is a great video. I'm happy I watched it. But what y'all think, bro? This didn't really change my opinion, honestly, because like I never thought the 90s was trash, and I never actually thought Jordan didn't have a left. Like it's like a funny troll thing to say. But like, come on now. The greatest player of all time, well, one of them, My greatest player all time is LeBron, but y'all go couldn't go left. That just don't. What do you mean couldn't go left? Anyways, bro, this is a W video. Thank you for watching. Click any of the videos that's on the screen. Subscribe, follow TikTok and Twitter, and yeah, I'm gonna see y'all later, bro. Peace.